This is what I read in April. The first book that I finished this month was The Count of Monte Cristo. I started this book in February and I only had a little bit left, so I finished reading it during the beginning of April. My copy of this is on the verge of falling apart. So my thoughts on the ending without giving any spoilers. I was very confused in the last couple of pages. I had no idea what was going on. But then in the last, I think, 2 pages, everything started to make sense. And I loved it. I loved the ending. Overall, I gave this book 5 stars. It was quite the journey and I really liked it. The next book I read was The Magician's Nephew, and according to the publication order, this is the 6th book in the Chronicles of Narnia. But chronologically, this is actually the first book, which takes place before Narnia was actually even created. So we see these 2 children in London, and the boy's uncle is a magician, so he's the magician's nephew. And the magician makes these special rings that can transport you to another world, and so they happen to find their way in Narnia while it's being created at some point. I quite liked this book, so I gave it 4 stars. And I liked how the ending of this book ties in with the beginning of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. So now I only have one last book in the Chronicles of Narnia that I haven't read yet, and that is The Last Battle. The next book I read was the uncensored version of The Picture of Dorian Gray. I love The Picture of Dorian Gray, it's one of my favorite books, so I was really intrigued to read the uncensored text. And I read this alongside the original text so that I could see the differences. So some things I noticed, Sybil's name was spelt differently, and there's a lot of chapters that weren't actually in this book. In fact, I don't think James Vane, which is Sybil's brother, was even a character in here. So this book was definitely a lot shorter than the published version. Also in the published version, details on the yellow novel that Dorian is obsessed with were taken out. So for example, like the title, the main character's name, and there's also small details like word choice just slightly altered, or even the way a sentence is structured. So yeah, that was interesting, and I gave the original text 5 stars. I do have to say I like the original text a bit more, just because I think the extra chapters with James Vane add a lot more depth to the story. Following that, I read another book by Oscar Wilde, which is Only Dull People Are Brilliant at Breakfast. This is a very short read and it just consists of like sentences that are kind of unrelated to each other, like this. The way it's written almost reminds me of journal entries. It was quite interesting and I love Oscar Wilde's writing style, and I gave it 4 stars. The next book I read was The Tower of Nero. This is the last book in the Trials of Apollo series, and this is also my favorite book in the series. I feel like the series as a whole was definitely not my favorite of Rick Riordan's books. The first 4 books I rated either a 3 or 4 stars or something in between, but for this book I rated it 4.5 stars. I think it's because 3 of my favorite characters are in this book, which include Will, Nico, and Rachel Elizabeth Dare. I don't know why when I say Rachel's name I have to say her full name, because that just feels right. And Will's unexpected superpower, like he can literally turn into a light bulb. I love Solangelo so much and I really want to read The Sun and the Star, so hopefully I'll start reading that soon. The ending as well was so good. I feel like I really like the way Rick Riordan writes his endings. Apollo returns as Lester to Camp Half-Blood and Camp Jupiter and just kind of goes around to everyone. I'm also so proud of Piper at the end. Piper is also one of my favorite characters. I love her so much. The next book I read was Ruin and Rising, which means I finished reading the Shadow and Bone series. This is definitely my favorite book in the series and I rated it 4.5 stars. I also finished watching the show and I feel like it's quite different. Bagra's backstory in this was so brutal. The cut scares me so much, like I can't even imagine that. Actually I can because I watched the show, but still, it scares me. And if I thought the Volcra was terrifying in the first book, that was like nothing compared to the Nietzsche Boya. I almost feel like I prefer the show a bit more because we also have the crows who are involved with the story in retrieving the blade that helps them fight the Nitroboya. So I really like that. I also love Nikolai, so that's a sign for me to buy King of Scars because I really want to read that, and I also love Sawyer. So yeah, hopefully I start reading King of Scars this month because I'm definitely not ready to let go of the Grishaverse yet. The next book I read was Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World. Wow, this book was amazing. I rated it 5 stars, and this is the sequel to Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, which is one of my favorite books. I love Ari so much. I think he develops as a person so much in this book, and he becomes a lot closer with his family and friends. I also love Cassandra Ortega. She is such an iconic character, and I'm so happy that Ari becomes closer with Gina and Susie in this book. But I do feel like I like the first book a little bit more. The way it was written was so beautiful, and I felt like I read it at a perfect time in my life. I do think this was a really good sequel though. The last book I read this month was Camp Jupiter Classified. After reading and loving Camp Half-Blood Confidential, I really wanted to read Camp Jupiter Classified, but I feel kind of disappointed by this. I definitely did not like it as much as I thought I would, and I expected it to be kind of similar to Camp Half-Blood Confidential, but this was more like, I'd say, a journal style of a 12-year-old's experience at Camp Jupiter. This book ended up not interesting me that much, so I rated it at 2.5 stars. That is all I read in April, and if there was one book that I'd recommend from all of them, it would be Aristotle and Dante. This May, I will be reading Ovid's Metamorphoses, and I've started reading it already, so I'm really excited to continue reading this.